Evening all. No long live stream intro this evening. Straight into it. Are you paying too much rent? Is your rent too high? And if so, what can you do to reduce the rent you're paying? And when I say, is your rent too high? I'm saying, are you now paying more rent for your home than the market price for that home? So I want to be really, really clear. So there's been quite increasing numbers of publications on the rental market that are all adding up to say that rental demand is easing. Where it's still going up, it's going up less slowly. Where it was going up slowly, it stopped going up. And where it had stopped going up, it's now starting to come down. There are some places where some rental indices are reporting falling rents. And the one that caught my eye recently and made me think about doing this video was one from Hamptons, which uses the whole of Countrywide's rental portfolio of 90,000 properties as its index. So quickly going to have a look at that, what's happening in the rental market right now, because it's a very, very difficult one to measure. And of course, it changes enormously depending on whether you're renting a large detached house or whether you're renting a studio flat or anything in between. They all do different things in different areas. But once I've gone through these couple of stories, I'm then going to talk you through a real example of someone who got their rent down and how to go about it. And by the way, also who shouldn't try and do this. Let me also, just before I get into this data, remind everyone that a happy tenant equals a good landlord. Because if you're a happy tenant, it means you're happy with the property and you're happy with what you're paying for it, right? And first and foremost, if you're a happy tenant, don't rock the boat. Doesn't make sense if you're happy. But if your gut feel says, I think I might be overpaying for rent now, then this is what this video is for. Tony G, this is Yorkshire tea. And very good it is too. Okay, so first and foremost, I did actually touch on this in Friday, on 5 Fact Friday a few days ago. Okay, so this is from Goodlord, which is a large provider of services to the rental industry, and they do a rental index each month or so. But let me just get to the point, and I've linked to these below. I've linked to the Hamptons one below, actually. But there's a region that recorded a reduction in rents during January, and that was the southeast, that saw a minus 0.6 reduction in average costs. Now, this is actual rents paid. That's what Goodlord measures. They also have confirmed that actual rental prices, or confirmed rental prices as they call them, significantly undercut advertised prices by between 20 and 24%. 24% in London, 20% outside London. Now, these again are averages. So don't get overexcited and think that this means that all asking rents are 20% too high, you should offer 20% below. That's not the case. There are averages. And if you are competing for a very small number of smaller places with large numbers of tenants, you're not going to get it for 20% below the asking rent. But it does suggest that at the other end of the scale, rents are maybe even more than 20% too high on the asking rent. More importantly, and this is where I think there's a real hint of what's going on here, is that the void periods are the highest since 2021. So the void period is how long a landlord's property stays empty in between tenants. And it went up from 21 days in December to 24 days in January. That's a significant increase in 1 month. And this points to a softening of demand in the market. Not everywhere, just overall. I can't keep, because I just know that I'm going to get people going, but rents are still going up where I am and I'm a landlord. Yes, I know. There'll be lots and lots of you for whom this is not what's happening and you are seeing different stuff. However, this is the overall trend in the market. Okay. And William Reeve, who's the CEO of Goodlord, says, on the face of it, You have another month of rising rents and a rebound in pace of year-on-year increases. But when you dig deeper, you can see the void periods at their highest and confirmed rents are meaningfully undercutting advertised prices. It's a picture of a market that continues to be buffeted by supply and demand issues, but that could be teetering its way towards stabilizing. We are definitely seeing a softening in the market, right? We are definitely seeing a softening in the market. Now, that means that we're seeing an increasing number of places where rents aren't going up and rents are starting to come down. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you is this, and this is one that I have linked to below. So Hamptons is one of the rare corporate brands that I actually admire and respect for being less sharky than all the others. Although even though they are actually owned by Connells, it's not their fault, they're owned by Connells. But the Hamptons Lettings Index uses data from Countrywide Group to track the changes to the cost of renting based on 90,000 homes let and managed by Countrywide each year, adjusting for location and type. And it is based on achieved rather than advertised rent. So this is actual rent prices, or it's an index of all of them. And the most important thing to notice here is that in January last year, that dark line is the whole country, and the red line is excluding London, right? So London is pulling it down. This is percentage year-on-year growth. It's pulling it down. Whereas there was one graph in particular I wanted that was new lets versus. So here we are. In London, new let annual rental growth is right down here. The Midlands is still quite high, and in the north, new let rent is higher. But what they said in their press release, which I haven't got here, which is annoying, is that the rate of new rent going up is now 2% year on year nationally. Whereas renewed rents for people who are staying where they are and increasing their rent, and extending their period, is going up higher. And what that says to me is that there are people who are currently in tenanted properties who are under the impression that rents are still going up and are therefore not resisting rent increases that they could be resisting. And I'm always on the side of fair market value. Always on the side of, so, people paying too high, you're overpaying. Too low, it's not fair on the seller or the landlord. I'm always an advocate of whatever the market is doing now is the fairest thing, because that's what's best for everyone in the long run. So let me tell you this story. In a nutshell, this story was someone that moved into a property paying £2,000 a month, and after 6 months, successfully negotiated a reduction from 2,000 down to 1,800. So they got 10% off their rent after 6 months. And when the landlord later on tried to put the rent back up to 2,000, the tenant stood their ground and the landlord didn't get the rent back up. But specifically, I want to talk about getting the rent down in an existing tenancy, because that's never really talked about. Rent reviews are always considered to be upwards. In fact, some tenancy agreements even state that it can only be upwards. But if I can't, I'm so worried about the number of people that misinterpret this video thinking, oh, I've watched Charlie's video, I can just go and demand lower rent now. That's not the case. The first thing you should do, if you are under the impression that you are perhaps paying too much rent, is actually look at, if I wasn't living here and if I had to move out, where would I move to? What are the prices, right? And if it looks like actually for the same rent as you're paying now, you could get a nicer place, or properties like yours are being advertised for less rent, and if it's a significant number of them, then you can start to be confident that actually you might be overpaying, your instincts might be right, and it's time to bring the rent down. Because what you effectively need to do, and obviously this is I'm assuming that you are, first of all, a tenant who the landlord likes and wants to stay there. Because if you're not, if you're a pain in the arse tenant, if you're frequently late paying your rent, if you don't look after the property, if you cause problems, if you're a high hassle tenant, then the landlord is likely to take any opportunity they can to say, no problem, off you go, bye. They'll probably be glad to see the back of you. But if you are a tenant that the landlord likes because you've always paid your rent on time, you look after the property, you don't cause problems asking stupid questions, you know what I'm talking about, right? Especially often first-time tenants seem to think the landlord is like a hotel concierge. They can ring up and go, I want this and I want that, and you fix this and I'm paying you. You're not paying the landlord for on-call service. You're paying to rent the place that you're living in. Okay? So if you are a good tenant and you have a good relationship with the landlord, then you could basically work out what you think is the fair rent that you should be paying and put that to them. And the story I'm talking about, actually, the tenant went to the landlord and said, I think it should be 20% lower based on comparables. And the landlord came back and said, no, that's too low, but I'll agree to 10% off. Okay, because actually it's in both of your interests. A lot of tenants think that landlords would rather get you out and get someone in for higher rent. Every time they change tenants, there is a risk, there's a void period, and also there's the uncertainty of what a new tenant will be like. And it doesn't mean the new tenant might be a disrespectful one. It might be the new tenant that takes it over and then actually has a less reliable job. New tenants are an unknown uncertainty to landlords, whereas if you've been there for a while and you've been good, they like that and they want you to stay. And I'm speaking as a former landlord myself, right? Long time ago, but I remember it well. And really good landlords don't put rents up. They realize that in the long run, if they've got a low maintenance, reliable tenant who is looking after the property, just that's great. That's what you want. You just want to keep that like it is. So you don't want to go and upset that tenant by putting the rent up, which is why lots of people that I know have been renting for a long time haven't had a rent increase for a very long time. Or if they have, it's been a fraction of what the market's done because the landlord is going, don't rock the boat. Don't upset a happy tenant. Okay. But that is how in this market where there are certain areas where rents are weakening, you may find yourself, if you moved in at the sort of very, very peak, you may find yourself thinking, I think I'm paying too much rent now. It's your judgment call. And by the way, the other caveat is don't ever try this if you aren't prepared to stick to your guns, right? If you aren't prepared to say, look, unless you lower the rent to this, I'm going to move out, then you shouldn't renegotiate, okay? You should only renegotiate if you are really, really sure that the rent is now too high, that the landlord is unlikely to get the same rent if he puts it back on the open market and won't want to go through the hassle anyway. What I'm advocating here for is to pay fair rent and not too high and not too low, okay? And you might say, you might be a landlord which is saying, well, Charlie, based on that, shouldn't we put our rent up on the tenants that we haven't put the rents up on for a very, very long time? That's your judgment call based on your relationship with that tenant. Okay. I cannot, I don't need to tell any landlord to consider raising the rent if the market rents have gone up on their tenant. Right? You will know what you're going to do. But the thing is that if you put the rent up too high and the tenant isn't happy, they're just going to go anyway if there are other options available. So this is just, I never hear anyone talking about getting the rent reduced. And the story I'm telling you about was just last year. Okay, so it wasn't that long ago, and it can and does happen. Do we have any questions on that? Anyone got any questions on this? Otherwise, it's going to be quite a short video. Tony G says, my rent has been £800 for 3-bed semi for some time. How long is some time, Tony G? Is that okay? So 10 years ago it was 550, so it's gone up 250. It's gone up by 40%. Yeah, in 10 years. That's not bad. That's below inflation, isn't it? I know tenants who didn't have a rent increase for over 10 years because some tenants are really sensible. And if they're quite handy and know what they're doing, they'll actually do minor maintenance issues for the landlord anyway. And especially smaller private landlords love tenants like that. Yeah, Tony G again says, like the fence broke and we just fixed it ourselves. Yeah, that's the kind. Another tenant might have gone, oh, the fence is broken. Landlord, come and fix the fence. I demand you fix the fence right now. And yeah, I mean, the landlord probably will come and fix the fence, but then they're not going to want to keep your rent low if you're that kind of. It's worth investing in your tenancy if you're happy with it. Wow. No, this never split the difference. That book, I don't agree with that. That's never split the difference. Negotiation technique is it's the zero sum game, gun to the head approach, and the trouble is that even if you succeed in a negotiation like that, then whatever you're negotiating tends not to last if you're negotiating an ongoing rate for a relationship. And the thing is that don't try and negotiate from a weak standpoint, right? I mean, cars. I'm a big petrol head. I've loved cars my whole life, and I bought and sold countless cars. And there have been times when I've done extremely well as a buyer and as a seller of cars. And there have been times when I have been completely the loser on the bargain. It depends on your circumstances, the urgency, the specific specification of the car you wanted or whatever, that kind of stuff. And also your skill in the moment when you're right there with the person buying or selling the car, reading the room. And I've learned most of the best negotiation tactics that I now have. I've learned because they were used on me and they worked. But generally speaking, it comes down to your actual situation. Wow. So Yachek says, I'm renting a small 2-bed flat in South London. It went up from 1.1 to 1.3K in September last year. That's nearly a 20% increase. Ouch. And do you feel like that's now fair market value, or do you feel like you're overpaying? Killbat, is that a sex? Oh, I see. Oh, very funny symbol. I get it. Yeah, that is a big increase. Yeah, how long had you been there? Yeah, okay. How do I find out whether my rent is a fair market rent? Asks Yachity. Well, what you do is you imagine that you aren't living where you're living. You imagine that you're new to the market. You want to find somewhere like where you're living, and you go look and see what the prices are doing, and then you bear in mind the fact that Good Lord says that advertised asking rents are some 20 or even 24% above actual rents in London. Talk to agents, ring around, maybe inquire on some other properties, some other rental properties that you think look better value. Can you find a better or bigger flat than yours for 1.3K a month right now? That's just have a look around. Have a look around. Okay, guys, I think I'm going to keep this on short and sweet tonight. If we don't have any other questions on that, I'm surprised. I thought I was going to get some angry landlords having a go at me. Yeah, Lee, I agree with that. Compare apples to apples. Absolutely right. And also try and counterbalance, try and offset our natural inherent optimism bias. Okay. Just try and be a bit over realistic with yourself. I've got something else I want to talk about, but it's totally off topic. And this isn't the right video to do it in. So I think I might save that for Wednesday. And it's about sellers not understanding the concept of getting competing bids. You're welcome, Jacek. And guys, I'm still home alone, being daddy 4 days in a row care. And I've got kids to deal with. So thanks. I hope that was a useful, helpful video. Let me know. And if you've got any questions, you're watching this afterwards, after the live stream, put them in the comments below. Let me know your questions. And I'll see you on the next one. Thanks, guys.